Morning, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of On the Whistle 2025. It's just a gift that keeps on giving from a Sunderland perspective. We have a 2-goal comeback to talk about. First time, I think, in 177 attempts, I think I saw on Match Today last night, that Sunderland have come back from 2 goals behind to win in the Premier League. So you better believe that we're going to get into the weeds of it and have a good old long chat about it and answer your questions and comments as we always do. Really impressive stuff from Sunderland, and I think one of the things that I was thinking about kind of this morning reflecting on the game was that we knew that this was a team with a lot of resilience and a lot of character, and I think one of the things that really stands out for me so far this season, and it's something that was a bit of a continuation apart from that weird spell at the end of last season, where this team last year and this year always seems to respond well to a defeat, and I think it's such an important part of why they are where they are in the table. All 3 games that Sunderland have lost this season, they've won their next Premier League game. So after Burnley, Man United, Fulham, each occasions where you look at the games that followed, there might have been a little bit of pressure, there might have been a little bit of nervousness. Games where if Sunderland had lost again and gone back-to-back defeats, there could have been a bit of tension. And instead, Sunderland have won all 3. I think it tells you so much about the character and the spirit in this group. I think it tells you a lot about the environment behind the scenes as well, how calm it is. I think it's something that we talk a lot about how Enzo Le Fée is so calm, never too high after a win, never too low after a defeat. I think it's genuinely, in my opinion, one of the reasons why he tends not to go, since he's coming at Sunderland, on long runs of defeats or get stuck in a rut, really, because just hit that calm that he exudes to the players. It really seems to have built an environment where they can bounce back from defeats really quickly. So I think that's something that's really, really impressive, and I just thought it was worth kind of remarking on that before we actually get into the game itself, which for me, I thought this was a little bit of a step forward for Sunderland. Yes, the comeback element of it is really impressive, really important. A lot of teams would have gone under at 2-0 down, and huge credit to Sunderland for playing their way into it. But also, I kind of knew that about this team already. It didn't surprise me to see them respond to that adversity, to show that resilience, to show that character. Didn't surprise me that they were able to feed off the energy from the crowd, which was, again, incredible. Stadium Alight is turned into such a difficult place for teams to come. But I think the general performance and the quality and possession for me represented something of a step forward for this team. And it was a really, really interesting game because we've been having a lot of discussions off the back of the Fulham game, which obviously was a little bit underwhelming, certainly very disappointing, a bit of a flat display from Sunderland. And I was a little bit anxious in the week because I hope that because Sunderland have been poor in this game, that they don't move too far away from the template that has worked for them this season, which has been really, really resilient defensively, not giving up many chances, and sort of picking their moments to create things in attack, whether that through set plays or a transition. And it was interesting because in my head, my fear was that you could push it too far the other way, be really, really open against a strong Bournemouth side and get picked off. And what was odd about the first 15 minutes of the game was the scoreline suggested that was what happened, but it didn't actually really feel like that. I was really impressed with Sunderland's, not just their intensity and how aggressive they were in getting on the front foot, but how nicely at times they were knocking the ball about. I thought, Enzo getting into really good pockets of space, combining nicely with Isidore, with Xhaka, with Talby. And I felt that Sunderland were doing a lot of good things in the game, and yet obviously they were 2-0 down. There's 2 elements to that. As Le Fée said afterwards, this is the Premier League, you can get punished for mistakes so easily, and my word was Sunderland punished for a couple of little errors, especially that second goal, an incredible hit from Tyler Adams. Bournemouth, I think you would say that although I thought Sunderland had started well, in those opening kind of 20 minutes, you did feel like they could score with every attack. They looked so dangerous. They're a team I've got a lot of respect for. They lost 3 of their first choice back 4 from last season. They're still playing an ultra-aggressive, ultra-attacking style of football, really competitive. Le Fée spoke before the game about how he felt that they were a little bit of a model for what he wants to do with Sunderland over the next few years, and I think you can see that in their performances, not just their results. I think the way that they try and press, the way that they try and have a go at everybody, the way that they use their pace and their athleticism to create chances, I think Le Fée feels that it's a style of play, if you like, that really suits Sunderland. It really suits the fan base, what they want to see. And I think you saw that in the opening 20 minutes. Antoine Semenyo was such a threat. We knew he was a talent when he was here. You might remember that there was quite a bit of debate about the time about whether Phil Parkinson should be using him more because he looked like he had something in the very brief cameos when he came off the bench in those games, but I'm not sure anyone quite saw this level of development for him. I think, you read the reports about Liverpool, Manchester City, 60, 70 million pound bids. I think you see him play in person and you see straight away where that's coming from, and it leaves you with absolutely no doubt that it's a matter of kind of when, not if, he makes that kind of move for that kind of sum, because not just his athleticism but his quality. I mean, that cross, obviously he gets a bit of fortune that Mukele slips over. That first time cross that Evan Nielsen ultimately puts onto the post via Roos, and then Adley scores. That's a seriously wicked cross, that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I have a lot of respect for Bournemouth, and I thought they did some good things, especially early in the game. But Sunderland, I felt like they didn't have to change too much to get back into it, and it was interesting because we were talking to Lebris in the post-match press conference, and what he kind of said was, again, really proud of the resilience and character of the players, but he did also say, kind of in agreement with that he felt that probably the players could feel that even though they were 2-0 down, that the game was still there for them, that they were still right in it, because they'd been able to find that space, they'd been able to get up the pitch in the opening exchanges. And so I think he kind of felt that his view was that the players could feel that not too much was wrong, that they'd just been punished for a couple of errors. Credit to them for not getting kind of put off course by that. But you always felt like if someone could get the next goal, there was something in the game for them. Just as a little aside on the Tyler Adams goal, which obviously is incredible. It's very difficult to account for somebody running and scoring from just inside their own centre circle. Andoni Iraola, the Bournemouth manager, did make an interesting point after the game that they certainly hadn't planned for that, but they had planned for attacking from Sunderland's own corners, because the point he did make was that Sunderland are brilliant from set plays. They're so dangerous, as of course we saw in the second half. Great header from Brian Brobbey. But he did say that one of the things they'd looked at is because Sunderland commit so many players forward for their own set plays, there are big counter-attacking opportunities. And so, clearly he hadn't accounted for Tyler Adams shooting for his own half and just inside the centre circle and scoring. But he did feel it was something they'd looked at and they felt that they could exploit. So I just thought that was a little interesting aside, maybe something for Sunderland to consider as well. I guess that's the flip side of them being so good from their own set plays. But I felt like Sunderland could always get their way back into the game. And obviously the penalty is a massive moment in the game. It's one of those, straight away when I saw the first replay in the press box, it was never going to get overturned because Reynaldo gets across Alex Scott, there's contact, it goes down. There's no way that's getting overturned because there's no way it's a clear and obvious error. The interesting question is, if the referee doesn't give it, does VAR overturn it? Possibly not. The fact that they checked it for such a long period would suggest that they weren't really sure, and therefore I don't think it would have been overturned. So I think that's kind of one of the wrinkles around VAR, one of the things that makes it quite a frustrating process at times. And I think everyone can probably understand why Bournemouth were frustrated over the course of the game with the officiating. The strange thing is, I thought that most of the kind of major decisions, really, the referee got just about right. I think for me, it is a penalty. It's experienced play from Reynaldo. It is a foul, in my opinion. The red card later on, it is clearly a red card. It's obviously a deliberate act of violent conduct, in my opinion. So, I think that most of the kind of big decisions were right, but the general management of the game wasn't great. And, Andoni Iraola was asked about his players kind of losing their discipline a little bit later on. And he said, it's a problem, but also it's hard for me to criticise because I probably should have been sent off myself, which it kind of raised a wry smile and a little bit of self-awareness there. And he was trying not to sort of use the referee as an excuse, but clearly he was kind of infuriated by the performance. And I think that probably most people watching can understand that. But I don't think that the refereeing was the biggest reason why Sunderland won the game by any stretch of the imagination. I think that it's odd because you're looking at it and they've scored from a penalty and then from two set plays. But this, as I kind of gone back to what I was saying at the start of the video, I felt like this was a really significant step forward for Sunderland because I thought in possession it was their best performance of the season. Now, obviously, the opposition are a part of that. Bournemouth are a team that leave space. They're really aggressive. They want you to they're happy for you to have the ball at times. They're happy for you to kind of get into their half at times because they can really hurt you on the counter-attack. So that obviously was part of it, but a really brave selection from Lebris, not just to go back to the back four, but then to make positive changes further forward, bringing Enzo Le Fée into centre of midfield, which obviously allowed him to pick a more natural winger. Thought it was quite a bold move, and it really worked. It's, for me, the big story from a Sunderland perspective coming away from this game was kind of the arrival of Enzo as a Premier League number 8. It's his preferred position. You know, it's where we know he wants to play, and it's been interesting watching it because we've seen in parts that he's got the quality in possession to play there, no doubt about that. We've actually seen it part in times as well that he's got the tenacity defensively and the work rate to play there. So it's been one of those where he hasn't quite been able to take the opportunities he's had in the middle of the pitch. I think maybe Man United was the last game he started in centre midfield. It wasn't a good day for anyone really in a Sunderland perspective, that one. But a bold call, and hopefully, you know, we'll get to it in the questions later. He might be back on the left wing for the next couple of games because of what those games are going to look like. But this is a huge option for Lebris moving forward if Le Fée can sustain this form, because one of the big things we've talked about a lot this season is that Sunderland, yes, defensively very strong, but understandably for a newly promoted team, don't create loads of chances from open play. And if that's something that continues, it could lead to their form dipping. If Le Fée is able to play like this at home, creating the level of chances that he did yesterday, getting in the kind of pockets of space that he did yesterday, that's going to be a huge kind of boost for Sunderland moving forward. And Lebris spoke nicely about Le Fée after the game, saying, you know, I always believed he could play in this position for us in this division. It just so far hasn't happened yet for whatever reason, but hopefully today can kind of be the start of that. So I thought that was a really big one kind of moving forward for Sunderland. So yeah, I thought that although, you know, ultimately the goals have come from a penalty and two set plays, I'm taking a lot of positivity away from this, from the way that Sunderland were able to get on the front foot on home turf and play some really, really good high intensity football. You know, it is one of those where if the game finishes 3-3, if it had finished 4-4, if it finished 4-3 to Bournemouth, 4-3 to Sunderland, I don't think you could have any kind of complaints with the result. I think it was just that kind of game, a really chaotic, kind of crazy game to watch at times. I absolutely loved it. For me, like, you know, this is why I was so desperate in so many ways for Sunderland to win promotion in the Premier League, because I just think the pace, the intensity, the quality, it is just streets ahead. And, you know, you just come away with such a buzz from watching a game like that yesterday. Massive credit, as I've said a few times, to Bournemouth for their part in that. I love the mentality that they come into games with. But, you know, huge credit to Lebris and Sunderland for going toe-to-toe and taking the aggressive option, which, as I said at the start, I was kind of a little bit nervous about, because I worried about Sunderland going too far the other way after a bit of a tame performance against Fulham. So huge credit to them for taking the brave option and ultimately getting their reward with the 3 points. You know, big implications moving forward as well when you look at the fixtures that Sunderland have coming up, the way the results went yesterday. Those 3 points feel really, really significant. Psychologically getting past 20 points before December as well, a really big boost. So just a fantastic game at the Stadium of Light, fantastic result for Sunderland. Again, you know, the main thing that you praise again about this team is the resilience and the character. But I do think tactically there were some really big positives for Sunderland yesterday. I'm going to get into one of them now, because I'm going to get into some of your questions and comments. And Alan says, I think RLB's use of substitutes this season has in the main been brilliant. I know he's got a better bench than last season, but he certainly doesn't have the depth of some of the more established teams to select from. Yeah, I think this has been a big story kind of the season, hasn't it? Is how much more proactive and how much more decisive Lebris has been from the bench, because he's got those options. It was one of those where straight away when you see the 3 subs about to come on after an hour, you just sort of nodding your head, because weirdly, despite getting back to 2-2, straight after the half-time whistle pretty much, it actually felt like Sunderland's intensity dropped a little bit. I thought they were in a bit of a danger zone in the 10-15 minutes after that goal, not just because of Evan Nielsen's offside goal, but just because of the general play. There were a few errors in possession. The pressing looked like it was a little bit off. You just felt like Sunderland were in a dangerous moment in the game. So to make those kind of proactive subs, I thought was a really, really good decision. Great response from Trey Hume. He'd have been gutted to be left out the side, but he did well. Romain Mundle didn't really get much opportunity on the ball to show what he's all about, but the general energy and intent he brought I thought was really good. And not much more to say about Brian Brobbey at the moment. Another fantastic impact on home turf. Scored a goal, but more than that, his ability to stretch the play and hold the ball up really kind of helped turn the tide for Sunderland. So yeah, I thought that the subs were a really important part of the story yesterday, because I think Bournemouth were just starting to get on top of the game. And then the beauty of the way the game turned out was, obviously, because Le Bris had made those changes the way he had, someone get their nose in front, and then they can drop into that kind of 5-4-1, defend their box, something that, whatever you think about the back five and whether you prefer it or don't prefer it, you know, it brings someone so much in that kind of game scenario where they're defending their box. So worked out beautifully. There's always a little bit of fortune in that. I think Le Bris himself, every head coach would tell you that there's always a bit of fortune involved, but really good proactive decisions again that ultimately have paid off for Sunderland. So Stephen says, do you think Brobbey would have the same effect on the game if he started? And Neil says, is it time for Brobbey to start? I think Brobbey has to come in now. It's not a knock on Isidore, who I think has been fantastic this season in terms of the goal return he's got from a team that doesn't create loads of chances for the striker is excellent. I think his hold-up play has improved so much. I think a lot of Brobbey's success so far has come from the hard work Isidore's done to help tire defenders and get through a lot of work in the first hour of the game. However, I just think, you know, surely Brobbey is due a start, whether it's against Liverpool or whether it's against Man City. I'd love to see him get the opportunity from the start. I think the big thing for me is, I understand your point, Stephen, in terms of he looks like a really good impact substitution at the moment, but he just looks so sharp to me that I've got total belief that he can have an impact from the start, because, you know, he looks so much quicker, so much more dangerous than he did when he first came to the club. I think you can see there's a huge amount of work gone behind the scenes at the academy, like to get him up to his kind of best level. We've said it before, it's always the case when players don't have much of a pre-season. It's very, very, very rare for them to hit the ground running. It takes time, and I think you can see that with Brobbey. And especially in a game where someone might need their centre forward to kind of hold the ball up well, to bring others into play, because they're maybe going to be quite deep and not going to have a lot of possession. I would love to see Brobbey get a go from the start. And as I say, you know, Isidore will start plenty more games this season. I've got no doubt about that. But for me, it's the obvious call to make. I would bring Brobbey back. I would bring Brobbey into the 11, certainly, if not for the Liverpool game on Wednesday, then for Man City on Saturday, to see. He looks to me like a player who's ready for that. So then we've got, kind of round it off with, you know, I think the kind of talking point that everyone was kind of bringing in. So Johnny says, Enzo's superb in the middle. How can we keep him in his best position with the likelihood of us playing a back five in the next 2 to 3 games? Tom says, another Tillian performance, and we looked a more complete side with Alderete back in it as a back foot and as a back four against a powerful, speedy and skillful attack. Would you prefer we go with a 4 for Wednesday or revert to the 5? And yeah, I had a couple of other questions about the back five as well. So Chris says, although I'm glad we went to a 4-3-3, I suspect it will be 5 at the back for the next 2 games. Let's see what damage we can do to the current and former champions. Yeah, I would probably go with a back 5 for the next 2 games, to be brutally honest. I think that, you know, it's a template that worked so well away at Chelsea. It's something that worked really well against Arsenal. I just think that extra defender in your box is a real asset for Sunderland. It gives you a lot in terms of defending set plays, attacking set plays. I think, yes, at times there's a bit of a frustration that you don't get that kind of extra player in midfield sometimes, and that can kind of limit your chance creation. But I think it's the obvious option for me. I think it's 2 games that Sunderland can be positive about. You know, Leeds came so close to getting something at Man City yesterday. We've seen that, you know, Liverpool clearly aren't the team that they were last season at the moment. I'm not suggesting, you know, that someone should have a negative approach. I think there's something there for them. I just think we've seen at Chelsea that the best chance or the best way for them to get something out of these games is to have that extra defender who can help them be really, really robust in defending their box, and trust that they've got enough quality on the break and from set plays to get something out of it. I'd be going with a back 5 personally. I think it's a formation that works well. It'll be really frustrating for Enzo if, as realistically would happen in that frustration, he ends up back on the left, but I don't think it's the end of the world. It's what's best for the team on the day, and I think on these 2 occasions that's going to be the best thing for the team. And I've no doubt that a few weeks down the line we'll see him back playing in centre midfield after the performance that he produced. But let's see, who knows? Le Bris is sometimes predictable, but he always has the odd surprise every few weeks up the sleeve in terms of selection, and yesterday was the same. So let's see how he goes. A couple of very brief ones. Dave says, is Xhaka our assistant manager on the pitch? Was it his decision in the latter stages for the attacking players to press so high and encourage the Bournemouth defence to go along, playing into the hands of our defence? Brilliant on-pitch decision making. I don't know specifically whether that moment was Xhaka's decision, Dave, but something that Le Bris talked again about in his post-match press conference was, you know, given Xhaka the license to make decisions on the pitch. It's clear that Xhaka is empowered to make little tactical switches in the game. And Le Brice was really interesting because he said sometimes, I might not necessarily think it is the best thing to do tactically within the game, but he totally trusts Xhaka's feel for what the team needs on the pitch. Sometimes it's about sparking a reaction from his players, and that might be going and pressing a little bit more aggressively. And Le Brice kind of saying it might not be the best decision in his head for what the game needs, but he trusts that Xhaka's got that feel for what his players need and what the game needs. I think it tells you a lot about Xhaka, and I think I've said it before, it also tells you a lot about Le Brice, that he's not kind of protective about that kind of stuff, and that he's happy to let players of that experience and calibre kind of make those decisions on the pitch. So I thought Xhaka was a really important part of the win. Uncharacteristically a bit sloppy early on, but soon got on top of the game, and that second half performance was yet another just fantastic display from a real top player. And Johnny also asked how I'm feeling about the yellow card situation. Obviously Xhaka and Le Fée, Xhaka and Siddiqui, now on 4 yellow cards. I think that they've managed it really well in the last couple of games. Le Brice has made pretty clear that in that part of the pitch, it's really difficult to sort of manage it. You just have to kind of go game by game. But I wouldn't be trying to rotate to avoid yellow cards or anything like that. I think you've just got to trust the players. They've managed it really well in the last couple of games, and I think you've got to trust that maybe they can go and do it a little bit further. Just one thing to watch, that Trey and Reynildo are also on 3 yellow cards. So obviously they're not in the kind of danger zone yet, but if they were to get booked at Liverpool on Wednesday night, then they would also go into the Man City game with obviously a threat of being suspended for the derby. So that's just one little kind of wrinkle to watch. But yeah, I think that I am nervous about it, definitely, because losing either of those players, Xhaka or Siddiqui, for the derby would be a massive blow. But I also take some encouragement from how easily they've managed the last 2 games without really looking like them getting themselves into trouble. I know it's going to be a different kind of challenge away at Liverpool and away at Manchester City, but let's hope that they can kind of maintain that. And certainly the impression I get from Le Brice is that he's not thinking too much about it. He trusts the players to try and manage it. So there we go. I think that's about it. Yeah, thanks so much for watching. Fantastic to have another good Sunderland win to talk about. So yeah, there'll be loads of preview content going into the Liverpool game, both here on YouTube and on the Sunderland Deco website. So keep your eyes out for that. And I'll be back with On the Whistle after the Liverpool game, and back with another On the Whistle after the Man City game next weekend. So it's going to be a really busy week. So give us a like, give us a subscribe, keep coming back to the channel. We'll have loads of content for you. Thanks so much for watching and listening.